Israel-Hamas war live. Dozens killed in Jabalia camp strike Gaza official. Gaza's interior ministry says an Israeli air attack has hit apartment blocks in a residential area of the densely populated Jabalia refugee camp, killing and wounding hundreds. Director of nearby Indonesian hospital says at least 50 people killed, but there are fears toll could rise. Israeli troops pushed deeper into Gaza, with witnesses reporting heavy clashes after tanks reached a residential area in Gaza City. Israeli military claims North Gaza gains killed 50 Hamas fighters over the last day. Hamas did not immediately respond to the claim, which came shortly after Gaza's interior ministry said an Israeli attack on the Jabalia refugee camp had killed and wounded hundreds. A massive massacre, Al Jazeera reporter describes the scene from Jabalia. From the middle of a giant crater that used to be homes in the Jabalia refugee camp, Al Jazeera's Anas al-Sharif described the scene in front of him as rescuers desperately dug into the rubble with their bare hands, in footage aired on the network. "There was a little girl in this place. They're trying their best to reach this little girl," al-Sharif said. Around him, people were attempting to help those trapped or retrieve bodies. Others were in shock at what had happened. "Look at the destruction," al-Sharif said as he pointed to the shell of a building. "Most of the victims are kids, children, women. We've seen hundreds of victims here. The destruction is huge." Al-Sharif continued to walk over the rubble, amid an apocalyptic scene. "It's a massive massacre. You cannot count the number of destroyed buildings in this place." Israel defense minister says military operating on large scale, deep in Gaza. Yoav Gallant was speaking to soldiers at the Palmachim Air Force Base, according to the Israeli Public Broadcasting Corporation. He added the military had paid a heavy price over the last day. Erdogan, Israel committing crimes against humanity. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan has accused Israel of committing crimes against humanity in Gaza with the support of the United States and Europe. Erdogan, who has taken an increasingly strident line against Israel since the beginning of its attacks on Gaza, said that Israel must be stopped in comments made after a cabinet meeting. "Our discussions are ongoing to ensure the perpetrators of war crimes in Gaza are held accountable," the president added, before calling for a ceasefire to prevent a massacre followed by a path to lasting peace. EU's Borrell condemns Israeli settler attacks in occupied West Bank. The bloc's diplomat expressed great concern over attacks by Israeli settlers against Palestinians, which he firmly condemned. Following a series of contacts with the top diplomats of Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and Jordan, Borrell again called for a humanitarian pause in the war. Attacks by settlers in the occupied West Bank have surged since October 7. The UN has said at least 115 Palestinians have been killed in violence in the occupied West Bank since then. Israel says it struck more targets in Lebanon. The military said eliminated fighters who tried to launch anti-tank missiles towards Israel. Israel's military also said it attacked Hezbollah military infrastructure in response to launches carried out earlier today from Lebanon. Reporting from the Qura, southern Lebanon, Al Jazeera's Ali Hashem said that the distance, depth, intensity, and frequency of Israeli strikes in Lebanon have been increasing. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken could not finish introductory remarks to the United States Congress without 8 interruptions by protesters who were eventually removed. They were chanting ceasefire in Gaza and save Gaza's children, and they held up their hands, which were painted red. This hearing wasn't just about Ukraine aid. It was also about $14 billion in aid for Israel that the White House has asked Congress to approve. Blinken, along with U.S. Defense Secretary Austin, had the role at this hearing of selling senators on giving the White House what it wants. As expected, Blinken repeated that the U.S. is steadfast in its backing of Israel. In fact, he described with unprecedented graphic details the depth of the suffering of Israeli civilians on October 7. Notably, he made no mention of the deaths suffered by Gaza civilians in the time since. He did emphasize that the U.S. is working more on humanitarian assistance to Gaza, including upping the number of aid trucks now passing through the Rafah border. Blinken also said there is no indication thus far confirming Israeli fears that this aid could be diverted to Hamas. That has not been the case, and there's no evidence to show otherwise. There is bipartisan support for that $14 billion for Israel. The question is not whether this aid from the U.S. will pass in Congress, but in what form. Will it be attached to aid to Ukraine or be a standalone item?